Before we get started, I do want to apologize for the audio quality in these recent uploads. I am rebuilding my office right now, and that leads to some problems. So please do bear with me while I set up all the new equipment. It is going to take a little while. In any case, we have some things to talk about regarding Critical Role. Critical Role Campaign 4, the hype is in full swing leading up to that release in October. Very exciting for all of us, especially since they have announced a new format. West Marches. If you're unaware, Critical Role is going to have 3 different groups: the Soldiers, the Schemers, and the Seekers. They're all going to be playing in one shared world, and while they're going to have their own individual stories, there is going to be crossover. Their actions, their choices, they're going to have consequences for the other groups, all building to one grand narrative in a neat little narrative umbrella that encompasses the entirety of this fantasy opera. It's a very ambitious goal, and Brendan Lee Mulligan, the Dungeon Master, based on his previous portfolio, it looks like he's up to the task. He's very dang good at what he does, and I'm very excited to see his work on Critical Role Campaign 4. But I can't lie to you, ladies and gentlemen, and all those in between. I did feel a little bit of sweat going down my neck as I heard the term West Marches, as I played in a campaign with a similar big picture format. I too was at a table where there were a bunch of different tables, a bunch of different groups. We all played in one shared universe, and our choices affected each other in a big overarching narrative umbrella. And for me, it sucked. It kind of sucked. It was not a great experience. I personally did not have fun. So today, I'm going to be talking about my West Marches horror story, what it means for my hopes and fears for Critical Role Campaign 4, and what we can learn as DMs to make our own campaigns even better. Without further ado, guys, let's get started. Alright, you want to hear a story? It's the wrong show for that. Anyway, look, West Marches. Like I said, I didn't have fun when I tried it, which was about a year back. I was invited to a tournament campaign. Everyone in this West Marches was participating in this tournament in some way, shape, or form. Not all of us were fighters in the pit. Some of us were saboteurs sent in to mess with the players. Some of us were nobles looking down upon the competitors. Everyone had their own role. And honestly, this was a very interesting premise, so I jumped in, and yeah, it was certainly interesting from the get-go. For starters, I noticed that there were a lot of players. I don't mean like 13 people, a lot of players. I mean like so many players I physically couldn't count the amount in the Discord call amount of players. It was so many people. This was a problem from my first session because due to the volume of people, it felt like my individual character couldn't get a lot of focus. You also have to keep in mind, there's one centralized narrative. We weren't playing in a world with a bunch of disparate little plot lines. It was, for the most part, all revolving around the tournament. Yeah, we had little things going on here and there, but it all came back to that one event. And when you're dealing with a centralized plot line, it's hard to make every single one of the players feel like main characters in that single plot line. When you're dealing with a high volume of players, I feel like it's best practice to have a bunch of different plot lines going so that everyone can feel like main characters in their own story. I didn't feel like that. I felt like a background extra. I felt like a side character, and that wasn't great. It didn't help that the DM really wanted this to be a cohesive story. Here's the problem, though. We weren't playing in a world, we were playing in a city. One city. One tournament. Why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem because a lot of the events I was playing through, they had already happened, and there's not really much I can do to affect them. Let me explain. During my first session, I was going to a party, a throwdown. I was one of those saboteurs. I was there to mess with people. Now, I didn't want to derail the campaign or anything, so my plan was just to pickpocket some fools and see what happened. The problem was, this party had already happened for other players. They experienced their perspectives a week ago. We were just getting our point of view just now, meaning the events of this party, they've already been predetermined by the people who have already played through it. We were like the late birds who didn't get the worm, which sucked. The party's events were already laid out. We go there, dance, politicians show up, then a ghost appears, and the party gets attacked. Cool. It's not like I can take my psionic knife and assassinate the ghost. He's already been predetermined to throw out the floor of the party and become a boss fight for other people, so it's not like I can do that. It's not like I can kill any of those nobles, or hell, even trip them up, because their graceful entrance was already predetermined by the other groups who already experienced this. I, as a saboteur, couldn't mess with anything because it was already predetermined to go well. Hell, when I tried to pickpocket, the DM just said, like, oh, you do it. Nothing specific even happened, and that was a real bummer. The volume of people, our close proximity, and the fact that we were all in one centralized plotline meant that inevitably someone was getting shoved to the side, and unfortunately that someone was me, and some of the other players in my group too. It really hit me hard when I got to the end of the session and saw the way that the other people in the group were talking about it. Because, just to be clear here, I was the odd NB out. Everyone else really enjoyed themselves. I want to make that crystal clear. Everyone else was having fun, which is why I don't hate the Dungeon Master or anything. They were clearly doing something right that I was not vibing with. But the way the other players were talking, it did kind of make me sad. They were talking about how they felt like pawns on a chessboard, how they were experiencing the DM's genius, how they were the chess master controlling everything. And guys, that's antithetical, the opposite of what makes tabletop games so great. We're not pawns. We're the chess masters. We're the players. We're on one side of the board controlling the white pieces. The DM is on the other side of the board controlling the black pieces. The DM just happens to have the privilege of being able to like physically shake the board a little bit to throw us off our game. But we're supposed to be equals in this, at least a little bit. And that's not what I felt from this game, and even the people who enjoyed it, clearly they knew that too. I did direct my complaints to the game master. I told them how I felt in a text message. I didn't confront them or anything. I didn't make a big deal out of it because frankly, there were so many players. If I became an absentee person, I didn't really think it would be that big of a deal, especially since it didn't seem like I was very central to whatever was going on in the story. So I just took a step back, participated in 1-2 more sessions, and then the game ended. It looks like the people who stuck around and dedicated the campaign, it looks like they had a lot of fun. And you know what? Good for them. It just definitely was not my thing. So anyway, with that in mind, how do we apply this to Critical Role? West Marches is great, but you know what's even better? Today's sponsor! Today's episode is sponsored by Boot.dev, an incredible way for you to learn programming through adventuring. Now, it is really hard to learn how to code. As I've said before, I tried coding myself, and it was a pain. But Boot.dev made it look easy. And more importantly, it made it fun. They've gamified the experience with quest logs and boss fights to make it way more enjoyable to learn coding languages like Python, SQL, and Go. They even just launched a training ground, so if you're lagging behind on certain lessons and need some practice, then you can grind infinite challenges to get that practice in before you forge ahead with all of your questing and coursework. Oh, and best of all the content is free to read and watch. Though if you want the most out of your adventure, a paid membership will unlock interactive features like hands-on coding, AI assistance, and more game mechanics. If you want to start your journey into the world of programming, then you can head down into the description down below where you will find a link and a code so that you can get 25% off your first year on an annual membership. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. Thank you so much to Boot.dev for sponsoring today's episode. And without further ado, back to the tea. For starters, I want to acknowledge the many differences. Critical Role has 13 players. A lot of players, but it's not that many players, which is much more healthy. It's much more manageable for Brennan. On top of that, Brennan is a good DM, and because of the lesser amount of players, I think it's going to be easier for him to give everyone their own spotlight. I'm not worried about, like, Ashley Johnson or Travis Willingham becoming side characters at the Critical Role table. I think everyone's going to get their spotlight, just like how Matt has run the games in the past, just like how Brennan has run his games on Dimension 20 and on Critical Role. He's good at giving attention to everybody. I doubt that's going to change here. So why did I bring up that horror story? Well, because there are things that I worry are going to become a problem in Campaign 4, not for the players, but for the viewers. First up, time. A big problem in my experience was the time problem. We just didn't have a lot of time to do anything because there were so many players and we had to move on to other people. And with 13 people, I think that's still going to be something that the group needs to worry about. Remember, every character in this campaign is going to get split across 3 different parties. And depending on how they run this, I think they're going to run into a couple different problems. Method number 1, and this is the more likely method based on the interviews Matt and Brennan have given. They're not going to have soldiers at one table, seekers at one table, schemers at the other table. Like, yeah, that's going to happen, but for the most part, the groups are going to be crossing over to each other very, very frequently. This is good because it's going to maximize the time that the audience has with these characters, but what about the time they have with each other? Like, if we're constantly intermixing the tables, then there could be a scenario where Laura Bailey's character and Marisha Ray's character, they have really good chemistry, just like they had in Campaign 3. But because the tables are constantly swapping in and out, those characters may not get a lot of time together, and that character development may not happen. Again, as a viewer, a big draw is the chemistry between these characters. And if we're swapping out players all the time, it's going to be a lot harder to build that chemistry. You're going to have less time. The other way you do this is that you keep the groups more stable. Soldiers at one table, schemers at the other table, seekers at the other table. We swap them out week to week to week. This does mean a couple of good things for the group. For starters, more stable relationships. You know, the schemers are going to have their rapport, the soldiers are going to have their rapport. It's going to be easier for the audience to connect with those dynamics. On top of that, it makes the crossovers more special. The Avengers movies and the Arrowverse crossovers, they're special because they don't happen all the time. We don't get to see Iron Man and Star-Lord interacting frequently, and being able to see this fresh, new dynamic. It's like your 2 best friends from different schools meeting each other for the first time. It's just cool to see them getting along, right? And making the crossovers between the groups more special, that could be good. However, there's a problem with that. If we have soldiers in one week, seekers the next week, schemers the next week, does that mean we have to wait a month to see the group that we prefer? Yeah, that would suck, which is probably why Matt and Brennan seem to be leaning towards the first option, despite the problems that I do have with it. Look, no matter what option you pick, you're going to have some sort of time problem. We're going to have less time to get invested in these characters. And that does make me sweat a little because the characters are what make Critical Role so special. Now, there is a solution to this, and that is just do what Critical Role has always done. Make characters that work. In my opinion, with very few exceptions, Critical Role has been shockingly good at making characters that people love. In every other video game, television show I've watched, there is some MC that's not relatable, that's not likable, a character that we can do without. I brought up Marvel earlier, and yeah, there's a fair share of Marvel characters that definitely have their own hatedoms. Critical Role, like, yeah, you have Ashton, Fern, Yasha didn't get a lot of time because of Ashley Johnson's shooting schedule, okay, but while those characters do have a disproportionate amount of dislike in comparison to other characters, they got their own fan bases. It's kind of shocking how Critical Role has been so good at making PCs that somebody loves. And for the most part, most of them are almost universally beloved. Really, they just need to do that again. They just do it again with Campaign 4. If one of my favorite characters is absent from a session because the cast is swapping in and out, it's not a big deal because another character I really love is there instead, which works perfectly for me. Look, at this point, I don't know these characters. I don't know anything about them, which is great. I'm looking forward to learning about them. I'm looking forward to meeting all these new faces. It's the most exciting part of starting any D&D campaign. As long as these characters do what Critical Role has always done, knock it out of the park. I'm confident it's going to work no matter what format they decide to take the West Marches. It's exciting. But with that being said, I do have one big desire from Critical Role Campaign 4 before we end off this video, and I think it has everything to do with West Marches. The other big problem I had with my little RPG horror story experience was the centralized nature of the narrative I was playing through. Because it was so centralized, I felt like I couldn't really go off and do my own thing. Again, it's harder to make everyone feel like the main character if everyone needs to be the main character of this one plotline. It also doesn't help that Critical Role just did a big centralized narrative with Campaign 3. The Ludinous, Ruidus god plot with Predathos the God Eater. It was a lot, and I, like many people, preferred when Critical Role was doing something else. If you're unaware, in Campaign 1, Critical Role used an arc structure. In that first campaign, they were mostly isolated from the characters. Big, overarching world threats like the Chroma Conclave and Vecna, with character moments spread between each arc. Campaign 2 takes a different direction. The arc's still present, but they're more character-focused, each individual character getting to do their own thing. Jester with Traveler Con, Ford with his pirate arc. It was a really good format that a lot of people vibed with. I think this was Critical Role structure at its best. It was a great format that people vibed with. Campaign 3 took it in a completely different direction, focusing on a more centralized plot line that had one big overarching threat throughout most of the campaign, if not all of it. This had a good side, because when you're constantly swapping around between different character arcs, different characters in Campaign 2, there's going to be arcs that people don't vibe with. When we were doing Caleb's thing in the Kryn Dynasty, it was not very interesting to me, and so when they moved on, I was very relieved. With Campaign 3, if you like the Ludinous plot, if you like Predathos, if you like this big god conspiracy, you're well fed. If you don't, well, you're starving in a ditch somewhere. It's a big reason why I like Laudna so much in Campaign 3, because her story felt unique in the sense that it was disconnected from all the big god stuff. She had a much more personal narrative with Delilah, and that's why during a lot of Campaign 3, she was my best and favorite girl. She had her own thing going on, and I loved that. And I hope for Campaign 4, they go back to it. West Marches really lends itself to those more individual story arcs. On top of that, it looks like fantasy is moving in this direction. Not just fantasy, but like fiction in general. A lot of us are tired of the big world-ending stakes, and we're wanting something a bit more smaller scale. Not necessarily slice of life style. We don't need to turn every fantasy narrative into frickin' Friends, but having a more down-to-earth, low-level plotline is interesting. Recently, I've been reading a manga called Frieren. Yeah, I know. Crispy, the anime hater, is reading a manga. It's called Character Development. I've really enjoyed Frieren, though. For real, it's an amazing story, and it starts with the overarching villain of this world, the Demon King, getting killed. Frieren, for the most part, is about a mage, an elf, learning to form connections with people, more character-driven stories. Frieren does deal with some big threats every now and then. In her latest outing, she's joining her friends in a big spy plot, which is so hype, by the way. I love it so much. But yeah, it does build up into more big, overarching narratives, but it builds up to that. And even in those big overarching narratives, the focus is still on the individual characters. That's what I want out of Campaign 4. Smaller, little plots that focus on doing their own thing. I don't need everything to tie into that big central narrative. It can be simmering in the background, but don't have it be the focus until it needs to be. Ludinous, Odahan, Predathos. That was present in Campaign 3 from fairly early on, from the midway point, and then the party split happened, and it felt like a slog leading up to finally getting rid of Predathos, and then when we got there, we didn't even get rid of them. It was a whole thing. Oh my god, look. My point is, the characters, their dynamics, the smaller stuff, That's what made Critical Role special to me. That's what makes a lot of fantasy special to me. And I'm hoping that Campaign 4 uses the West Marches format to take that narrative structure to its maximum capacity, to create incredible character-driven stories with characters crossing over in different plot lines and having awesome dynamics between them. I'm excited for Critical Role Campaign 4. I'm glad they're doing something different, and I am so hyped to see how it goes. Look forward to coverage of Critical Role Campaign 4 if I end up keeping up with it. I do need something to fill Crispy commentary with, and honestly, it's not a bad option. But in any case, if you guys enjoyed this episode of Crispy Commentary and you stayed loyal to the tavern all the way through, then leave the comment West Marches to let me know you made it to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed so much, you want to see more of our content, then you might enjoy this previous episode of Critical Failure, where we covered Critical Role's dumbest controversies. It's linked up in the cards. A lot of making fun of rage bait there. You'll love it. But before you go, please do like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern so you don't miss any of our content when it comes out. And finally, if you want to support us directly, then you can head over to our Patreon to get exclusive D&D and Draw Steel content. As always, your support is what makes these videos possible. In essence, like, comment, subscribe, support. I will see you all next time. Farewell.